Welcome to our deep dive all about stress.
Ah,
You know, we've got a really interesting paper to go through. It's called Stress, Facts and Theories through Literature Review
okay.
from the International Journal of Medical Reviews.
Interesting.
And we really want to unpack, what stress is all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's jump into it.
Well, one of the fascinating things that this paper highlights right away
Okay.
is that there isn't just one definition of stress.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they found 11 different definitions.
11.
Yeah.
It seems like defining stress is stressful.
Right.
So tell me,
Yeah.
what are some of the most interesting ones?
Well, one that stood out to me frames stress as a disruption of homeostasis.
Okay.
So you can think of homeostasis as like
Okay.
your body's natural state of balance,
Hmm.
and anything that throws that balance off
Right.
is stress.
Yeah, like if you're, running late for work,
Yeah.
and your heart's racing, or
Exactly.
you've got a big presentation,
Yeah.
and your palms are all sweaty.
Yeah.
That's your body trying to
Yeah, it's reacting.
Yeah.
It's reacting to that and trying to regain equilibrium.
yeah.
Another definition that I found particularly insightful
Okay.
is this idea of stress as a relationship between a person and their environment,
Okay.
where the demands exceed their perceived resources to cope.
Well, I like that one
Yeah,
because that really highlights how our perception shapes how stressed we feel.
absolutely.
It's not just the external event,
It's not just the event.
but it's how we interpret it.
Right, and what resources we believe we have
Yeah.
to cope with it.
So somebody might be very confident in their abilities and experience less stress
Exactly.
than somebody who, doubts their skills in a situation.
Absolutely. And it really underscores the importance
Right.
of, our thoughts and beliefs
Mhm.
in shaping our stress response.
I'm already rethinking how I view stress.
Good.
The paper also talks about different ways to categorize stress.
Yes, it does.
So tell me about that.
It breaks it down into three main categories.
Okay.
First, we can look at the nature of the stressor itself.
Okay.
Is it physiological, like an injury or an illness, or is it more psychological, stemming from things like
Right.
work deadlines or relationships?
So a broken leg
Yeah.
would be physiological.
Physiological.
And worry about an exam would be
Psychological.
psychological.
Exactly.
Okay.
The second way to categorize it is based on its influence.
So,
Is it positive stress, which is also known as eustress, that actually motivates and energizes you?
okay.
Or is it negative stress, which is distress?
Right.
That feels overwhelming.
Yeah, I like that distinction between the two
It's important.
because not all stress is bad.
Right.
Like that nervous energy before a big performance
Exactly.
can help you.
That's eustress.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the third way to categorize it is based on exposure time.
Okay.
Is it acute stress, which is a short-term burst, like getting stuck in traffic? Or is it chronic stress that lingers
Oh, that's
for weeks, months, or even years?
that's the one that's bad.
Like a demanding job.
Right.
Or a difficult family situation.
Yeah, chronic stress.
Yeah,
Seems like the villain here.
it is. And the paper dives deeper into how our bodies respond to that stress,
Yeah.
both in the short term and long term.
Okay.
It explores three dominant perspectives
Okay.
that researchers have used to understand stress.
All right, lay it on me.
The first perspective is the response-based view,
Okay.
which focuses on our physiological reactions to stress. And this was largely shaped by Hans Selye's work on the General Adaptation Syndrome, or GAS.
GAS, yeah, I've heard of that, but I need a refresher.
Okay, so Selye proposed
Yeah.
that we go through these three stages in response to stress.
Okay.
First, there's the alarm stage, where our body goes into like fight or flight mode.
Yep.
Then if the stressor persists, we move into the resistance stage, where we're trying to cope and adapt.
So our body's putting up a fight,
Exactly.
trying to maintain balance.
Yeah, but if we're stuck in that resistance stage for too long, we end up in the exhaustion stage,
Right.
where our resources are depleted and we're more susceptible to illness.
It's like you're pushing a car to its limits.
Yes,
Eventually, something's got to give.
that's a great analogy.
Okay.
And this leads us to the second perspective on stress,
Okay.
the stimulus-based view,
Right.
which emphasizes the stressors themselves.
Okay, so instead of focusing on how we react,
Mhm.
we're looking at what's causing the stress.
Exactly. Researchers like Holmes and Ra
Okay.
studied the impact of life events
Okay.
on our stress levels.
Yeah.
And they developed a scale that ranks different events based on their perceived stressfulness.
Oh, interesting.
Things like the death of a loved one,
Yeah.
divorce, or even getting married
Okay.
can all contribute to our overall stress load.
So it's about understanding the different pressures we face.
Right, but this perspective has its limitations. It doesn't account for how we all perceive and cope with those events differently.
Right, because what's stressful for one person might not be for another.
Exactly. And our personalities and our past experiences
Yeah.
and our coping skills all play a role.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to the third perspective, the transactional cognitive model,
Okay.
which acknowledges that interplay between the person and their environment.
Right.
This was shaped by the work of Lazarus and Folkman,
Okay.
and it emphasizes how we perceive and interpret stressful situations.
Okay, so two people facing the same challenge
Yeah,
could have very different stress levels
exactly.
because of how they view that challenge
Exactly.
and their ability to overcome it.
Absolutely. And this perspective highlights the power of our thoughts and the importance of developing effective coping strategies.
This is giving me a lot to think about.
I know, it's fascinating.
I know.
Now, I know you're interested in understanding how all of this applies to the workplace.
Yes, I am.
And this paper has a lot to say about that.
Let's dive into that next.
So this research paper really digs into the impact of occupational stress.
Yeah.
And the findings are pretty alarming.
Okay, so how bad is it?
Well, the World Health Organization defines occupational stress as
Right.
what happens when the demands of a job
Yep.
exceed a person's ability to cope.
Okay.
And the research shows that job strain is incredibly widespread,
Wow.
leading to some serious health problems.
Like, well, what kind of health problems?
Studies have shown a direct link
Okay.
between chronic workplace stress and things like coronary heart disease,
Wow.
anxiety, depression.
That's not something to take lightly.
No, it's a major concern.
So what can people do
Yeah,
to manage workplace stress?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
And one that researchers are constantly exploring.
Right.
But one thing that this paper highlights is the importance of recognizing the signs of burnout.
Burnout. I
Yeah.
hear that word a lot.
It's a buzzword.
So what exactly does it mean?
Well, burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion
Okay.
that can leave you feeling completely drained and disengaged from your work.
So it's like hitting a wall.
Exactly.
You just can't give anymore.
You just can't give any more. And the paper outlines 5 stages of burnout,
Yes.
starting with the honeymoon phase,
Okay.
where you're still feeling excited and energized about your job.
We've all been there.
Right.
And initial excitement.
But as the demands start to pile up
Right.
and the stress becomes chronic,
Yeah.
that initial excitement can fade.
Yeah.
The next stage is marked by a lack of energy.
Okay.
And then you start to experience chronic symptoms
Uh-huh.
like fatigue, irritability, difficulty concentrating.
I think a slow burn.
It is a slow burn.
Yeah.
The stress gradually chips away at you
Yeah.
until you're a shell of your former self.
Yeah. And if it doesn't change,
If things don't change,
it keeps going.
it can escalate into a full-blown crisis
Oh, yeah.
where you feel completely overwhelmed and unable to cope.
So what happens then?
So
To give up.
if the stress continues,
Okay.
you can reach a stage of stalemate
Okay.
where you're just going through the motions,
Right.
feeling detached and disillusioned.
Yeah. That's a recipe for unhappiness.
It is.
Yeah.
And it can have a ripple effect on your personal life, your relationships, your overall well-being.
No. So who's most at risk for burnout?
Well,
Is it just people in high-stress jobs?
while high-stress jobs certainly contribute,
Okay.
the paper found that people in human service professions,
Okay.
like social work, nursing, and teaching,
Right.
face a particularly high risk.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
You're constantly giving.
They're constantly giving of themselves emotionally and mentally.
Yeah.
Compassion fatigue is a real issue in these fields,
Right.
and it's crucial for people in these roles to prioritize self-care
Right.
and have strong support systems in place.
So we've talked about the psychological and emotional impacts
Yes.
of stress,
Mm.
but what's going on in our bodies on a biological level?
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
This paper delves into the science of stress,
Right.
exploring the complex interplay of hormones and systems
Right.
that are activated when we're feeling the pressure.
So break it down for me.
Okay.
What's going on?
Well, the star of the show is the autonomic nervous system,
Okay.
or ANS,
Okay.
which controls all of our involuntary bodily functions,
Okay.
like breathing and heart rate.
The things we don't think about.
Exactly. And
Right.
within the ANS, there is a branch called the sympathetic nervous system, or SNS,
Okay.
that takes charge when we're faced with a perceived threat.
Okay.
It's what triggers that classic fight or flight response.
The fight or flight,
Yeah,
that adrenaline rush
exactly.
when we're in danger.
The SNS releases a surge of hormones like adrenaline and noradrenaline
Right.
that prepare our bodies to either confront the danger or run away from it.
It's incredible.
It is.
What kept us alive
It is.
back in the day.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
In today's world, our stressors are often more chronic and psychological.
Right. They're not saber-toothed tigers.
They're not saber-toothed tigers.
Yeah.
They're more like deadlines and traffic jams.
Yeah, and relationship issues.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
when that fight or flight response is
Yeah.
constantly activated, it can actually start to harm our bodies.
Oh, no.
Chronic stress.
Right.
And the prolonged release of those stress hormones
Yeah.
can lead to a whole host of health problems.
So what else is going on in our bodies when we're
Wow.
chronically stressed?
Another key player is the HPA axis,
Okay.
which stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful,
Okay.
but it's essentially a chain reaction in your body
Okay.
that gets triggered when you're stressed.
Okay, walk me through it.
Okay, so it starts with the hypothalamus,
Okay.
a tiny but powerful region in your brain that acts like a command center.
Right.
When you perceive a threat, the hypothalamus releases a hormone
Okay.
that signals to the pituitary gland.
Which then sends a signal to the adrenal glands.
And the adrenal glands are what release cortisol, right?
You got it.
The stress hormone.
Cortisol is designed to help us cope with stress in the short term.
Okay.
It provides energy, it suppresses inflammation,
Okay.
and helps us focus.
So in small doses,
In small doses, it's beneficial.
it's good.
But when cortisol levels remain elevated for long periods
Uh-oh.
due to chronic stress,
Yeah.
it can wreak havoc on our bodies.
Like what kind of havoc?
Well, chronic stress and elevated cortisol have been linked to everything from weight gain and sleep disturbances
Okay.
to anxiety, depression,
Wow.
and even heart disease.
That's a long list.
It is a long list.
Yeah.
And it underscores the importance of finding healthy ways to manage stress
Right.
and give our bodies a chance to recover.
So we've talked about fight or flight.
Yes.
We've talked about the HPA axis.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other key concepts
Yes.
related to stress? The paper also touches on some other important concepts like anxiety, homeostasis, and allostasis.
Right.
For example, anxiety, while often intertwined with stress,
Yeah.
is more about worry and unease,
Okay.
often about things that haven't even happened yet.
So stress is more about the present threat
Yes.
and anxiety is more about future problems.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's homeostasis,
Mm.
which refers to our body's natural state of balance.
Right. And stress disrupts it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And allostasis is the process of achieving stability through change.
Right.
It's our body's way of adapting to the demands of stress.
Right.
Whether it's physical or psychological.
That's like finding a new equilibrium.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while allostasis is essential for adapting to stress in the short term,
Okay.
prolonged exposure to stress can lead to something called allostatic load,
Okay.
which is like wear and tear on our bodies.
So it's not just the intensity of the stress, but also how long it lasts.
You nailed it.
Mm.
Now, I know you're also interested in understanding the spiritual and cultural dimensions of stress.
Yeah.
And this research paper actually touches on those aspects as well.
Perfect. Let's dive into that.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting that this paper explores a spiritual perspective on stress,
Yeah.
specifically within the context of Islam.
It is really fascinating.
So what are the key takeaways?
Well, the paper emphasizes the importance of faith,
Okay.
remembrance of God,
Mm-hmm.
trust, virtue, patience, and prayer
Right.
as sources of strength and resilience.
Yeah. It's like finding comfort and support
Yes,
in something bigger than yourself.
exactly. And it highlights how spirituality can play such a powerful role
Right.
in helping people cope with really challenging situations
Yeah.
and maintain a sense of inner peace.
That's a perspective that's often overlooked,
It is.
but clearly has a lot to offer.
It does.
Before we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
there was one point in the paper that I really resonated with, and it was talking about how our culture shapes our experience of stress.
That's such an important point. It
Yeah.
suggests that, our cultural norms, our values, our beliefs
Right.
really influence how we perceive stressors,
Right.
the coping mechanisms we use,
Right.
and even the types of support we seek out.
So what might be considered a highly stressful situation in one culture
Right.
could be totally normal in another.
Exactly. And the coping strategies that are encouraged or discouraged within a culture
Yeah.
can also vary widely. So
Right.
what works for one person may not work for another.
Yeah.
And it's so important to find approaches that resonate with our individual needs
Absolutely.
and our cultural backgrounds.
This deep dive has given me like a whole new understanding of stress.
Good.
It's not just a feeling.
Yeah.
It's this complex interplay of, biological, psychological, social, and even spiritual factors.
It really is.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is
Yeah.
understanding it
Mhm.
is the first step to managing it.
It is.
Recognizing the different types,
Right.
the ways our bodies respond,
Yeah.
the factors that contribute to our experience.
Absolutely.
We can start to find what works for us.
Exactly.
This has been so eye-opening.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a whole new toolkit
That's great.
for navigating stress.
Yeah.
Thanks for being such a great guide.
You're welcome.
On this deep dive, I feel empowered
Excellent.
to tackle stress head on.
I love to hear that.
Yeah.
All right, well, that wraps up our deep dive into stress. We hope you found this exploration insightful. And remember, managing stress is a journey,
Yeah,
not a destination.
that's right.
So be kind to yourself
Yeah.
and keep learning.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.